Hey guys, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with the Jane Austen July tag. I was actually tagged by me, Simone, and I last July, and I'm just now getting around to it. So if you're behind on your tags, you're not as far behind as I am. I decided to wait and do this tag actually in Jane Austen July and give myself the opportunity to finish all of her works and see if my answers would change. I have now finished all of her works, but my answers have not changed. So let's just get right on into it. The first question is, what is your favorite Jane Austen book? For me, that's Emma. I'm so glad that I decided to read Emma this year because I think I finally understand what Jane Austen is all about. I think in many ways, a lot of her other books have just not worked for me as well as this one has, and I've liked most of her books, but there have been very few that I thought, wow, I love that. And I just was coming to the conclusion that perhaps she was not an author for me. I'm so glad to say that when I read Emma, I found that that wasn't the case. I think Emma might be the truest Jane Austen for me. It might be the only Jane Austen I can tell you that I truly love. Maybe Northanger Abbey too. But for now, Emma is my favorite, and I really don't see that changing. Question number 2 is, who is your favorite Jane Austen protagonist? And for me, that's also easy. That's Fanny Price from Mansfield Park. I know a lot of people slam Fanny, and there are a lot of people who just in general don't much care for Mansfield Park. I actually really like it. And in many ways, it's the book of Jane Austen's that has stuck with me the longest. I still think about Mansfield Park in a way that I actually don't think about Emma. Mansfield Park, just for me, is so rich in terms of character. And I think the best character there is easily Fanny Price. I think Fanny Price is just so dynamic. And I understand really why people don't like her. I can see why people don't like the book. Let me put it like that. So in a way, I see how there are people who think the book falls flat and that nothing happens in the book. But people who don't like Fanny, I just don't get it. Yes, maybe Mansfield Park can be boring in parts, but I don't think that's due to Fanny at all. I think Fanny is a character who knows her own mind and really understands what she wants. It might not be something that we as a reader agree with. We might want her to get more involved in the drama and get more involved in the conversation and choose a different love interest. That's my opinion. I don't think anything that happens in Mansfield Park really happens because Fanny is persuaded to do something by her love interest. The men's opinions matter very, very little to her. She's just gonna do what she thinks is right. And for me, I really appreciate that. She's a standout in classic literature for me. Okay, question number 3 is, name a book off of your shelves that Jane would wholeheartedly approve of and why. And for this, I chose Jane Eyre, which might seem kind of odd, but let me get there. I think Jane Austen would love Jane Eyre because clearly from Northanger Abbey, she does have some interest in Gothic novels. And I think there is a similar level of humor in Jane Eyre. Jane's very funny, and there is an entire section in this book that deals with Mr. Rochester literally dressing up as a fortune-telling woman and coming into the house specifically to tell Jane's fortune to her. And that's hilarious. I'm sorry, it's funny. And I think it was funny even at the time. But there's also a really interesting section of Jane Eyre that I won't spoil for you. I will just say that it has to do with a character called St. John. And I think that would be of particular interest to Jane Austen from a class perspective, because I think Jane Austen liked to play with class and liked to comment on how the different classes interact with one another. And so I think there is a large portion of Jane Eyre that would be of particular interest to her. I don't know how she would feel about the ending. I don't know how she would actually feel about Rochester, but I think she would really value Jane, and she would definitely value that kind of class discussion. Number 4 is, name a book off of your shelves that you think Jane would have hated and why. And for this, I chose Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I think Frankenstein is a novel that really wants to play with certain concepts and certain philosophical ideas, and it's not very character-based. There are certain characters that really stand out, especially the monster. I don't think she would really care for Mary Shelley's style, and I don't think that she would care for how this book kind of places concepts above characters, how it places this kind of really philosophical storyline maybe above characters. And there's also no real love in this. There's actually not even really a very happy ending. I just don't think Jane Austen would have gotten on with this. Maybe she would have. Maybe that would be interesting. But I just feel like Mary Shelley and Jane Austen probably would not have gotten on style-wise. Number 5 is, who is your favorite minor Jane Austen character? Easy, Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill from Emma. I want a book about them so bad. They were easily some of the most interesting characters in Emma. I think that's probably why Emma rates so highly for me, is that it's a book that's filled with really dynamic, well-rounded characters, especially the side characters. It doesn't feel like Emma is the only character in the narrative. And so Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill really stand out for me. And I also want to mention Henry Crawford. Henry and Mary Crawford too, from Mansfield Park. They're some of my favorite characters too, and I really love them. A book from their perspective would have been interesting, as a matter of fact. But Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax, they really do it for me. Number 6 is, name a book off of your shelf that you feel was somehow inspired by Jane Austen's body of work. And this is probably a cop-out answer, but I really think Elizabeth Gaskell pulled a lot from Jane Austen. And I think in some ways kind of perfected on some of the things that she was doing, because Elizabeth Gaskell also likes to talk about class. She also likes to have this kind of nice, funny, charming love story. And there's a lot of humor in her writing too. So I think she pulled a lot from Jane Austen, but she made it her own. I might like Elizabeth Gaskell more than Jane Austen, but she is one who I definitely see the comparison with. Number 7 is, which Jane Austen character do you simply love to hate? And for me, that's Henry Crawford. I love Henry Crawford. In fact, I don't even hate him. I can't even say that I hate Henry and Mary Crawford from Mansfield Park. I love them. And that's another reason why I just really like Mansfield Park. I do feel like all of the characters are really fully fleshed out, especially the antagonists in Henry and Mary Crawford. I love them. And another is, of course, the iconic Wickham. I love to hate Wickham, and I do hate Wickham. I just find him a really interesting character in his own right, and I would be interested in a book from his perspective, as a matter of fact. I think he's an interesting character. He is certainly a real villain, but he's also somebody who I think has you going for much of Pride and Prejudice. I really actively want to believe that Wickham is telling the truth throughout much of Pride and Prejudice. And when I'm confronted with the facts, I really think that he played a good game. And he really made you believe that he was a good person. But he's not. Wickham is a creep and a money-hungry dude. So he's really not somebody that you want to be around. Henry Crawford is a similar thing for me, but I think Henry Crawford could have been saved. I think he could have become a good person. We should have given him more of a chance. That's what I think. So that was a really quick tag for you. I think nearly everyone has done the Jane Austen July tag at this point, but if you haven't, consider yourself tagged or tell me your answers down below. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.